Hello, 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 everyone. Hello. Oh my goodness. I cannot even remember the last time. Actually, I do. I have the date. I have the date. It was November 22nd was the last time I was here live. And now I have way too much light. I'm trying to use YouTube's own stuff. And this is all new setup, but I'm excited. I'm kind of trying something a little bit different um, on how it goes. So you're going to have to bear with me for a second because I am trying to figure all this out. So let me give you a little bit of an update. First of all, welcome to Plant Consciousness Commentary. If you're new around here, hi, I'm Tigra Gardenia. Actually, as a matter of fact, I just remembered. Hold on. This is going to be exciting. I actually have an intro for Plant Consciousness Commentary, which is exciting. Like I said, I'm sort of playing with a new setup, and it's going to take me a minute to get everything working. So hopefully you'll bear with me. And so yeah, it's going to take a second. Anyway, as that is sort of preparing itself in its oops, that wasn't supposed to happen. Hold on a second. All right. I know. I'm a little bit scattered. And so if you're watching this for the first time, sorry, that's me. I have so many things. Before I go live, I actually had a whole series of things I was ready to talk to you about. Now that I'm live, my mind just went completely blank and I didn't take notes. I really wanted to talk to you about a whole series of things. So first and foremost, let me tell you what we're going to do today. I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview and just give you an overview of how things are going. It's 2025. It's a brand new year. I spent the better part of today organizing all of the different papers that I had, because what happens is I get a lot of different alerts and information from different journals. And so what I do is I pop them into a folder so that periodically I go through that folder and I review all of the papers. If you knew, obviously, papers around plants are, especially for the interests that we have and what it is that we want to hear to do, is a little bit hard to collate because there are tons and tons of articles and papers and stuff that are around, how plants do things. So, how does a plant open their stomata, and how do plants move this kind of hormone from here to here, and what does that do? And lots about manipulating genes and, resistant agriculture and all kinds of different things like that. So I have to wade through all of those to pick off all the interesting ones for the purpose of art. I am very, very bright. Sorry. Actually, I'm going to lower this one. I have two lights because it's dark where I live. It's dark. And I just realized that one of these is extremely bright. I don't know if that's better or worse. So actually two of them are bright. Let's bring both of them down. Okay. I think that's a little bit better. Anyways, you'll tell me. Anyways, the point I was trying to say is to go through all of these papers and to pick out the kinds of things that we really want to talk about. And then at the same time, then I get off on a tangent because we have plant consciousness and sentience, which is what we're going to talk about today. And in particular, we're going to very much pick off where we just left off last time. So in November, actually, hold on. I'm not going to tell you that yet. I haven't gotten there yet. Then there's an entire new sections, all these new sections. For example, I found some really interesting ones about plants co-creating with plants in cinema, which if you remember, we went through a whole series of different papers that were talking about co-creating with plants in the world of theater. And so cinema, if you think about it, is an even, bigger stage from certain perspectives, and I'm really excited to see these. So there's all these different papers, and so I need to go through them. I need to give them an order and then give them a sense, and so it takes a while. I only went through 2023 because because I hadn't finished. We haven't finished 2023, and I do have a few papers that are a little bit older, but I think they've just been surpassed by the stuff that is happening in 2000 and that happened in 2023 and 2024. So we're just going to go with that. But let's do this. Let me see what happens when I try to run this intro. I've never shared screen before here, so I'm not exactly sure how this works. To share audio, share a tab or screen instead. Okay. Oh, okay. So I have to share a screen. I'm learning how all of this type of stuff works because there's oh yeah, hold on. Also share tab audio. I can't do it in a tab, entire screen. That's why. Okay, also share. Here we go. All right. Look at that. We have yay! I don't even know how to take myself out of this, so I apologize to you because I probably is a way for me to take myself out of it, but I don't know how you do that, and I'll figure it out. It's going to take a little bit. So let's run this, and then we can move forward. So you know who the heck I am if you're here and you actually know what we're going to talk about. Play, please. Okay, so you want me to share the entire screen, but then you put this little button there, and then now I can't do that. Oops, that was not what I wanted to click on. Okay, so I have to like actually make this a little bit smaller and close off stuff and show you parts of my, yeah, that didn't work either. Wow, we're just is Mercury in retrograde or something? Because, it's making me look really bad here. I'm gonna figure this out. This is why people use other kinds of software. I thought I would be, in line with what YouTube wants, and I would use YouTube software, and welcome to Plant Consciousness Commentary. I'm your host, Tigria Gardenia, nature-inspired mentor, certified life coach, and the founder of the Conscious Community. Known as a world ambassador for plants advocacy, well, there you are. I don't know how to get myself off the screen, but I promise I will learn how to do this, and I will, next time it'll be better. Oh, the things we have to learn when we work on all these pieces. Okay, let's get into the hardest stuff because I'm kind of I should just tell you what we're doing. Okay, here's what we're gonna do. Last time we got together, we had a long conversation and we went through a paper called Plant Sentience Between Romanticism and Denial Science. Now, this was a paper that was by Segundo-Ortin and Calvo. Both of these, Paco Calvo, those of you who are in the naturally conscious community and specifically who are in the plant consciousness, the Plant Wisdom Book Club, will know Paco Calvo because we read his book together. Planta Sapiens, which also, a little bit gave birth and inspired Michelle to create the Planta Sapiens, which are awesome. And one day I need to bring Michelle onto the podcast so that you can see the Planta Sapiens and like the whole birthing story of the Planta Sapiens. I'm note to self, invite Michelle to do this. So they, Paco Calvo, who is a philosopher in Spain, and he works on plant neurobiology, plant intelligence, proving it. He's very scientifically focused, even though he's a philosopher. He's a practical philosopher. In other words, he does experiments, and he carries out experimentation in the whole world of plants. And then Segundo-Ortin, who he has worked with for years, which I don't actually remember if he's in Spain or in Brazil. I get confused. There's so many of them. So that paper really took a deep dive into the contentious debate around plant sentience in particular. Now, mind you, if you go back through all of the plant consciousness commentary, you will know that we have done very deep dives into the whole world of plant neurobiology. We've dabbled in plant cognition. We've talked about plant consciousness. We've talked about different aspects of it. And all of these different words have different meanings and yet similar meanings, which is really interesting about them. So in this particular paper, which you can go back and I'll make sure that it's in the show notes. I think it's already there, but I'll make sure it's in the show notes. You can just go back into the playlist and you can find that paper since it was the last one that we talked about. They talk about the fact that they try to take a little bit of a more provocative way where they're saying how plant consciousness, there's this staunch a sort of denial that plant consciousness is a thing when it definitely is a big part of, like, there is very scientific based knowledge to support the idea that plants are sentient. But more than anything, they addressed what they believe is the kind of naysaying that's existing right now. They tried to address it head on with cognition and plant biology science. So both from the cognition perspective as well as from the intelligence and the biological sciences, and really challenging this traditional view, this narrow view of sentience that certain scientists take on when you try to apply the word to plants. In other words, when you try to apply it to other species, there's like all this big openness, but when you try to apply it to plants, it gets denied. In this commentary at the very end of it, they basically put out a call. They said, hey, we're doing this as an open paper. We are looking for replies. We want you to reply. We want you to tell us your thoughts. And then from there, we will also reply. So they, let me see if I can grab that tab so you can see it and you can get an idea of what happened on this. So let me share my screen. Screaming. So let's just say, here it is. So here is, for example, the original paper. It came out in the Journal of Animal Sentience, and an interdisciplinary journal on animal feeling. And this came out in 2023. We went through the entire paper, and then at the very end, there was a call to action on this paper that we want you to reply. And people replied. In other words, lots of other types of scientists provided their own commentary. So these are the papers. We're going to start going through them. Don't worry about it. They're not super, super long. I have not read any of these. We're just going to be pulling them up one by one in order to try to understand what kind of replies they get. So we're looking at this together, and we're going to explore these different topics. So the first one is by a scientist by the name of Stephen Harnad. Oops. Pull him up. I also have my setup a little bit differently because since I'm using, like I said, YouTube, I'm still trying to understand kind of what's the best setup for everything. So it's going to take me a minute, and I might switch again. So here we go. Let's do it this way. Here is the paper. It is called Insentient Cognition, ? And so every single one of the papers that we're going to go through today are commentary of what was already talked about, like what it is that Calvo, which is the other paper that I have here, this is the original paper by Segundo-Ortin and Calvo. And so these are all commentary on that one. Now, as you can see, at the University of Quebec in Montreal. So here's the abstract of it. The state that it feels like something to be in. Cows have them, cars don't. Cognitive capacities are a subset of behavioral capacities. Not all behavioral capacities are cognitive, but the distinction is fuzzy. Might the difference have something to do with whether the behavior is the behavior, not the behavior, but the behavior is sentient? In other words, is what differentiates between a behavior that is in the world of the science that is trying to say this is just a behavior that happens, for lack of a better term. No, let me rephrase that. Reactive, automatic. There is no thought process or decision making or any kind of reflection in the behavior. It's kind of like when they tap your knee and you're, reflect you automatically move your leg. It's that kind of perspective, right? So that's a behavior, but it is not a cognizant behavior, where instead there are behaviors that are cognizant. In other words, some process of me takes a second or even less sometimes to reflect and make a decision. And this is really, for some scientists, that's the difference between whether or not plants are sentient. Sentient requires you to be aware and have made a decision on something. So this is a professor of science remember, and you can go back and you can look through this through the papers, plant cognition field is very young. In reality, all of the plants, anything of plants as thinking beings is relatively young. Even plant neurobiology, or the safe way of calling it, plants signaling and behavior, are really only about 20 years old. Remember when we started Plant Consciousness Commentary, I think about 2 years ago now, I started with all of those papers from the very birth. So we're talking about the fact that cognition as part of the plant way of looking at things only comes into play maybe 10, 15 years ago. I'd have to go read through the papers to remember, when Monica Galliano starts doing her experiment and opens the field of plant cognition, right? Before that, cognition as a phrase, or the cognitive sciences, or psychology wasn't in it. Last year, to a conference at the University of Padova called Plant Facts, and it was hosted by the psychology department. So plant sentience type of perspectives first are born inside of the plant sciences with some philosophy, hence where people like Paco Calvo get involved in with Stefano Mancuso, or with František Baluška, or Elizabeth van Valkenburg. Those three names are all scientists that work in plant sciences perspective, so biological studies, for us to start to explore this concept. And actually a marine biologist, so therefore, without an expertise in the factors of how exactly, looks like my connection is unstable. I should probably close a bunch of stuff off. I just realized that while I have an unstable connection and I'm trying to get things to work, I'm just going to shut down anything that does old news. And for some ways, it's very new news. So, all right, hopefully it is stabilizing. I am closing everything off. Dang it, I was on a roll. Okay, I think. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, I've got everything closed off now. So hopefully that will improve how things happen. Sorry about that. Sorry for the leap. Okay, so when to the field, so those of you that have read Thus Spoke the Plant, or who have seen about her studies, or who have heard things talking about, for example, the Mimosa perdica, who falls and learns to not look at that kind of fall as something dangerous and doesn't close the leaves, or the famous idea that plants learn how to, in a Pavlov dog's kind of response, to not to associate a different type of sound to sunlight. All of these types of things are Monica Galliano coming into the field. And because she was not a plant sciences, she said, and if you read her book, she explains exactly why she chose to go down this field. But she says, I have been asked by the plants to work on this type of stuff, but I am not a plant scientist. So what do? I go into cognition. I go down the road of psychology, and it opens up this idea of all of this critical plant studies and this plant first through plant cognition. And then that opens it up to the plant humanities, which is really reading all this because I think it's important for us to recognize kind of the background and the understanding of where it is that all this kind of stuff comes from. So now we're in the place where we're still, after 20 years, arguing as to whether or not plants are sentient beings. And kind of frustrating, but it's where we are. So let's see what this person, what Professor Harnaud had to say. And conceptual distinctions might be helpful for this discussion of sentience in general and the question of plant sentience in particular. As a quick aside, it's extremely frustrating to me that, and I've said this a bunch of times, but I'm going to keep saying it, which is that when it comes to a definition of sentience, I find that it always gets modified when we start to talk about plants, as if the regular definition, of which plants would amply fit into, is not something that we can do. Super frustrating. Anyway, 1, sentience is the capacity to feel. 2, felt states, feeling is not behavior, it is a state that it feels like something to be in, right? So I know that sounds sort of Of course, that's the way we humans think. But from a plant perspective, it means can the plant or is the plant aware that it is having a feeling? This is the fundamental question we're trying to answer when we talk about sentience. Does the plant in the moment that it is feeling something, whether it's a physical something or it's an emotional something, does the plant have an awareness that it is, or that key is, because we don't use as key as the pronoun, the singular pronoun for any being of in my in the show notes, does key recognize that key is having a feeling? So I feel like something to be in. If something to some sentient organism sometimes to be in an overheated state. Do I know I'm hot? It does not feel like anything to a pot of water to be in a state of boiling. A pot of water is not sentient. It cannot feel. Yeah, you might just piss off a few of the water people with that comment, but let's just give it to you for now. Or let's just talk about the pot. The pot does not feel. 3, affective states. And we've gone through a few affective state papers, which are super interesting that you can go back through in the plant consciousness commentary and the playlist. You'll see them. Feelings are not just the pleasurable or adversive states. Many feelings are effectively neutral, unbalanced, sensation to move, right? I am aware that I am moving to see, to hear, to touch. So being in a sentient state pleasant, because sometimes we try to think of this in the context of is it painful or pleasurable, but also humid or dry or dark or light or loud or soft or many other different things. I am aware that I am having an experience. Then 4, cognitive states. Felt states can also include cognitive states, like what it feels like to recognize someone, to recall something, to want something, to know how to get somewhere, understand a sentence, or to think something, or sometimes to not understand a sentence and recognize that you don't understand. Okay. Cognitive capacities. Cognitive states, which again are not behaviors, need to be distinguished from cognitive capacities. This is probably one of the more clear descriptions that I've seen of all these things. The ability to do certain kinds of things, such as move, respond to optical or acoustic stimuli, store information, transmit information, and learn. Cognitive capacities are behavioral capacities, capacities to do certain things of observable and measurable things. So this is my capacity to respond to something that's happening or to take actions that are necessary in order to respond, which is where things like transmit information or learn come about. And then there's vegetative capacities, which in this case, it's really bad that we still use the word vegetative as in unaware, but we'll get through that in a language. There is a language one in this. So hopefully the language one will address this. Only some behavioral capacities have come to be called cognitive capacities. The difference between cognitive and non-cognitive capacities can be fuzzy. Sometimes non-cognitive capacities have been called vegetative when they are exhibited by animals. Ugh. Every behavioral capacity is a physical, so is every felt state, but not every physical state is state, i.e., a state that it feels like something to be in. An automobile engine can have a detector that signals when it's overheated, but it would have to be a very different kind of entity in order to be able to feel overheated. And a lot of these things are being outlined because when it comes to plants, one of the difficulties in all of this work that we're talking about is that for the okay, let's just remember we're talking about scientists cannot go with the plant told me, right? We need something more than that. Well, you can just tell me the plant told you and I will believe you, but they need something. Therefore, they're trying to outline all the different things that a plant could be potentially showing a behavior, but there's not cognition happening behind it. And so Did I show you my lip gloss? Check out my lip gloss. I have a wait, sorry. I am Groot. I keep going to the wrong direction. I am Groot. I am totally in love with this little out soon because it's actually not the I don't normally buy like plastic and I'm just in love with it because, who doesn't love Groot? And it's my lip gloss and I love lip gloss. Okay. Relations. Feelings like behaviors and cognitive capacities is the place, in my opinion, where plant scientists get very tripped up with and predictable from observable behavior. Behavioral capacities, both non-cognitive and cognitive, are capacities to do certain kinds of observable, measurable things. In other words, feelings is a really difficult thing because how do you understand if a plant is having a feeling? Now, I'm going to state something that for me is extremely frustrating. The scientific community tends to, in a large part, lean towards the perspective that since if plants are having feelings, plants are not having feelings. Rather, we can't measure, we have no way of knowing having a feeling, therefore, maybe they are, maybe they aren't. And so we're going to approach this from the perspective the plants are having feelings and let's just run with that. So we put it up on the top and say, this is based on the fact that on the assumption that plants are having feelings. But no, that's not what happens. And hence we get into the arguments we're currently having. Inference. Behaviors themselves are directly observable and measurable. Feelings are not. Only they're observable and measurable. Those correlates and predictors, which sometimes, what's the word I'm looking for? Beings, when they have certain kinds of states, chemicals like serotonin and other aspects. So there are many of these hormones that plants produce that implies that if with gives us a sense of feeling, one of the arguments that does that mean that plants are feeling too? Because if not, why would we have these? So that's kind of, it's this mixed piece that it's about understanding whether substance in a human, whether the same on a plant. Some are saying yes, therefore plants must feel, saying are not understanding whether or not that's possible. So those correlates and predictors are included in observable and measurable activities of the nervous system. Oh, and there's an entirely great paper because that's another piece that some scientists lean on. Plants don't have nervous systems, therefore they can't be sentient, where there is an entire other research that says our definition of a nervous system is based on biological factors when it should be based on functions, and therefore if it's on function, have a nervous system. So Clarissa asked me, hi, do you know anything about sassafras plant medicine? I'm from Louisiana, want to learn more. They say in Colombia that it heals the heart. So I'm not exactly sure about sassafras in the sense of working only with sassafras, but I do have a bunch of information and even a really great podcast episode that you might want to listen to of my Reconnect with Plant Wisdom podcast is the episode with on plant spirit medicine with Dr. Patrick Hinault. I think you'll really enjoy that because I think it will give you kind of the answers that you're looking for. It's not specific to sassafras, but it's about how to create a relationship with different. So if not, you can just reach out to me and I can put you in touch with others, or we can work on depending on what the specific situation is. Thank you for the question. That was super useful. Like I said, learning how, anyway, yes. So Clarice, just reach out to me or check out my podcast. Okay, animal sentience. So here we're starting to get to. In the case of animal sentience, the question is which behaviors and which capacities, whether behavioral or physiological, of which animals are credible and reliable correlates and predictors, hence evidence of feeling. Remember, in the scientific world, Unfortunately, I haven't figured out why. It's this base reference that says everything, every being is non-sentient unless proves otherwise. When the proof is only based on human understanding, we're screwed. But anyways, those of us who know that all of these other beings are sentient, we persist and we try to show the wonderful scientific community why they're wrong. I shouldn't blanket say the scientific because there are plenty of scientists, as we're seeing here, that you will see more of today, that actually that plants are like that other. Oh wait, sorry, I didn't finish the other one. Excuse me. Journal on feelings in fish has been about. Now, plant sentience. Okay, so Segundo-Ortin, Calvo's, which is the previous plant consciousness commentary for you to check out, current target article is about feeling in plants, which had until recently seemed to have very little from growth. Tropisms. Tropism is I'm growing toward or against something. It's the plant sense is a tropism. Physiological or biochemical secretion and signaling. Are any of the newfound behavioral capacities of plants credible and reliable correlates and predictors, hence evidence of feeling? That's the question that they're asking, the question that they're trying to explore. Plant cognition, question mark. The growing evidence on behavioral capacities in plants, including learning, memory, and response to anesthesia, which is something that Paco Calvo talks about, but it was an experiment with Balushka and a few others, is extremely interesting, relevant, plausible, and imminently ripe for dialogue and discussion of the kind that is already well underway in the case of animals with nervous systems. Again, there are some that just say that plants have nervous systems too. It's just that they're not biologically similar nervous systems to the ones humans have, but instead are a different format to the same function. Are any of these behavioral capacities cognitive? Distinction between vegetative and cognitive function is already. Might sentience itself be the criterion for what counts as cognitive? That was really crappy to end with the word vegetative as in not sentient and cognitive as in sentient when we're talking about plants. This response, I think, gives a lot to the papers that we've talked about. You will see that plants are plainly inside of many of these different aspects. And so there's no reason for us not to consider plants as sentient beings. But it's to me that he didn't give an actual distinction. I think he just decided to define the term as much as possible. Let's see what the next one is, okay? Because I don't think we understand these until we go further through the list. So the next one is Paul Struick, plants detect, somebody who's like leaving the idea open to somebody who is very plainly saying, this isn't gonna cut it. Plants don't do this thing that you want them to do. This a lot. So let's get it. All right. So again, if you're new here, then besides the fact, of course, like, subscribe, do all that kind of cool stuff. Just a reminder, we are going through commentary replies to a paper by Paco Calvo and Miguel Segundo-Ortin called Plant Sentience Between Romanticism and Denial Science. This was a paper that they put out, a commentary, and they asked for comments from other types of scientists. And we have lots of different kinds that are responding. So here we have somebody who is from the Netherlands, the Wageningen. Plants detect and adapt, but do not. They are. This is a professor. Why is this important? If you remember from our last conversation, I mentioned the fact that one of the big elephants in the room is that in the moment it becomes scientifically acceptable. Okay. Scientifically, I just realized, am I muted? No. Have I been muted this entire time? No, I couldn't have been. My mute button seemed to have been pressed, but am I muted now? Can you hear me? If you can hear me, please leave me a comment because now I'm super confused. This is so weird. Sorry. I'm again using this platform and it's like, whoa, that just acts very differently. Hello? Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Hi, Jamie. Okay, so why is it important to always read the abstract and why it is that you want to read who people are? Because if we blanketly agree that plants are sentient, if all of science was to turn around and say that they are, think about the repercussions across the way that we currently do. Just talk about scientifically. I'm not going to talk about clothing or food or furniture or any of the other billions of different things that we use plants for. But think about it from the scientific perspective of how we actually carry out science and research for even what we think are noble causes, like crops. We kill, we we do all kinds of different things. Now we also do this for animals. My nephew runs the he takes care of the animals for a research lab in the United States. And right now they're working with pigs. It's generally accepted that pigs are sentient, intelligent animals, and yet they're biologically modifying and genetically modifying these pigs for organs for humans to kill them. So it's not like it's going to stop all of science, but think about all the kinds that happen when you work with an animal that is known to be sentient. Now, imagine that in an entirely different way that I don't know if most scientists are ready to do. We'll see a few types of classes of scientists that really. One of them are people who work in agriculture, of co-creation of agriculture, and that plants want to be part of. Therefore, there's a relationship that can be created. Plant scientists aren't worried about that. They just want to generically modify the plants in the way that makes sense for what they want to accomplish. And then there's the entire neurobiology side, because they want to believe that humans are superior to everything. A few animals get close, but definitely not as good as we are. So the fact that this is a crop physiologist tells me that it makes sense why I would want to say that plants do not feel. But let's see what themselves. Abstract. Hot topic in scientific and popular media. There are moral reasons to respect both the service of plants to humanity and their natural integrity as creatures playing their own significant role in a complex ecosystem. All right. I have to say that that's already more than I expected from this person. So thank you. However, to infer that cognitive capacities that are present also in certain human and non-human animals calls for scientific rigor beyond mere analogy. The problem is built and predicated on human definitions, human thinking, which is what certain scientists, Monica Galliano, because you have to step out in thinking to try to understand how to even develop a scientific test that applies to the plant, something that many are not able to do. Anyway, let's keep going. The unique capacities of plants by Segundo-Ortin and Calvo are not necessarily linked to sentience. Nor is it likely that sentience is an evolutionary trait that's present to some extent in all living organisms. For all of you that study panpsychism or that who believe in all beings having some form of sentience or having sentience completely, I apologize to you for this person's behavior and thoughts. I'm with you. Solidarity. All right. The debate, here's the debate we're in. Segundo suggests it is about time for scientists to start taking the hypothesis that plants are sentient seriously. They argue that there are numerous examples showing that the behavior of plants is not just hardwired, numerous examples. They also claim that science underestimates the role of plant electrophysiology. The debate is at least 50-fold. Actually, I went through a paper that shows that it's about 200 years old at this point. 200 years we have been having informal discussions and debates about whether or not plants feel and sense beyond the automatic. Only in the last about 20 years have we had the scientific mechanisms to be able to go through them. Hence, when we even read in the Plant Wisdom Book Club, Emily Dickinson in her own rural way was working with the plants. I'm not even going to go there. I'm not going to muddy the water conversation with that kind of stuff. But I have to say, it's been about 200 years of these discussions. If you think of Bose, if you think about some of the early, anyway, there's so much. There's just so much. Hence why, like I said, we've been doing this plant consciousness commentary for a while. A philosophical debate explores how animals, plants, and other life forms differ from humans. A scientific debate seeks to ask new research questions and test new theories. A creative debate is an exercise in scientific imagination and speculation. Here, I concentrate on the scientific debate. I think he's trying to say that this is really a creative debate wearing with the label of a scientific debate, but that it's not really a scientific debate. Acknowledging that my stance is a product of my own personal worldview. Crops. Remember that. Crops. Moral consequences. The outcomes of these debates can have consequences. There's the elephant. I talk about this a lot in the previous edition, the previous episode. They can have a direct impact on how we look at plants, how we study them, how we breed and multiply them. There's that part. I want to be able to chop them up. I want to be able to do whatever the hell I want with them. And I don't want to have to worry about whether or not they're screaming in pain or telling me to screw off. And how we use them in agriculture. And then I'm going to eat them whenever the heck I want with no consideration of who they are. Should the moral objections against industrial animal farming also be extended to arable farming? What do you think about that? I have my own answer, but what do you think? Because I am now super curious as to whether or not you think it is. Okay, wait, sorry, where was I? I get so carried away with this because these kinds of people who are like, because it's going to be hard, we shouldn't allow it. It just drives me a little bit crazy. Be it organic or conventional. And should we treat our houseplants more the way we treat our family animals? I think everyone here has an answer to that. The answer is a very resounding yes. Yes. Yes, yes, you should. Yes. Attributing sentience to plants reflects an anthropomorphic view of plants. Can you explain to me how? I want taken to its extreme, this could result in treating them as Michelle tells us that ancestor has thoughts. Yes, ancestor. I believe the plants that lives with is definitely opinionated. Taking this result in treating them as individual beings, as many family owners do with their pets. Now, I don't mean that you have to treat them as a human family being. They are family beings. with their own rules, with their own way of being. I should not treat them the way I treat a human, just the same as I don't believe in dogs and strollers. If you're a person that has a stroller, please, can you please explain it to me as if I was 3 years old or 5-year-old? Okay. I'm a 5-year-old. Can you please explain it to me? Because I don't get it. So I don't want to put a plant in a stroller. I have seen people do it. I won't do it. But I do think that you have to treat them with a little bit more respect. A little bit more respect. The plant's life history creates an individual with a unique level of cognition and a special phenotype because of its own unique of experiences and decision-making processes. Yes. Moreover, each unique individual will be the result of unique parents and will pass on its accumulated expertise and knowledge to unique offspring through epigenetics. Looking at plants as individuals would influence our approach to their management and would require respecting the dignity of good. In earlier work, plants deserve respect for their integrity. This integrity of crop plants, nature, wholeness, completeness, species-specific characteristic, and their balance with their environment as they pursue their natural aims. We suggest that this integrity has ethical value, distinguishing integrity of life, species-level integrity, genotypic integrity, and phenotypic integrity. We elaborated ethical value in terms of human responsibility and respect for the right of crop plants to be nurtured and to express natural behavior. Does this mean we won't be growing them in rows anymore? Because I don't know any plant in nature that grows in a row. We elaborated these ethical notions further by expressing implemented this in practice in the case of red cabbage, where plant breeding has created a plant form that disrupts the functioning of young leaves and inflorescences. Assuming that plants are sentient might make our moral responsibility and respect toward plants even more urgent. Yes, yes, it will. Right. Yes. Heaven forbid you have a relate. I have to figure out, hold on. I'm going to take a second. I want to figure out, how do you do it? Can you, No. Oh, I don't do that. So crazy. Anyway, I was trying to figure out how I'd put your comment on screen, but I don't think so. I think you have to look at it in the chat. I agree, Michelle. Heaven forbid you have a relationship with your food. Assuming the plants are sentient towards plants even more urgent, raising the question whether moral responsibility and collectively as a community or also as individuals. This ethical point in relation to plant sentience, the scientific debate about plant sentience is of a different nature. 3, what is the reasoning of proposed? Papers on plant sentience usually describe the ability of plants to perceive signals, to communicate these signals internally, to interpret and respond to them, to do so in highly organized manner, to learn from this, and to adjust their future behavior accordingly. Plants also communicate to other plants, kin or not, and to other life forms, either for their own good or out of altruism. In the way plants behave, the proponents of plant sentience recognition, including capacities such as communication, kin and species recognition, decision-making, risk sensitivity, learning, memory, foraging, competition, mimicry, intelligence. If you go through the previous episodes of Plant Consciousness Commentary, you will find papers that I've commented on that describe every single one of these in detail so that you understand it both from the perspective of why this shows sentience, or even going so far as consciousness in some cases, and why some of them are saying, well, it's still not enough. So if you're very curious, please feel free to go through the playlist, or you can find them also on my website and you will see all that information. Segundo-Ortin whole and serve to maximize fitness and decision. One could call that consciousness, and they indeed use that word. They also suggest that these capacities are only possible through a form of neurobiology, plant electrophysiology, So neurobiology is used in this. If again, go back through the old papers if you're new here, because this is a branch that says that certain aspects of plants' behaviors are driven by neuron-like and a nervous system-like or nervous system function, even if the biology is very different. So that's where the birth of neurobiology from the perspective of plants comes from. Plant electrophysiology, which is the fact that, or electrical activity in plant cells, the fact that we all have electrical activity, all of us beings, and therefore the electrophysiology is one of the main ways that plants regulate and work on and show behavior. As one of the major proofs of plant neurobiology, they describe experiments with administered. So the idea that a plant can be anesthetized, in other words, that there must be some kind of cognition, because if there was no cognition, then there would be no difference when a plant received anesthesia or not. The plant is exactly the same. But instead, since anesthesia goes to work on specific areas that would shut down your cognition, then that because plants react to anesthesia, they are cognizant. This is one of the main arguments being made by plant neurobiology scientists. My objections. Okay, we're getting to them. Hold on. I'm going to drink something. All right. My objections. My first objection is to the reasoning in this target article and other such papers is that it is based on reasoning by analogy. First, definitions and concepts that are commonly used in work on human cognition and sentience are stretched to make them broad enough to also include plant phenomenon. I'm going to finish this paragraph and then I'm going to state my feelings because I already have feelings coming up. Then proponents argue that it is acceptable to apply these definitions and concepts to plants on the basis of widely known, but not ubiquitous, phenomenon in the plant kingdom. The case is then built from there, mainly from indirect and weak evidence, or no evidence at all, speculating mainly from further analogy. These narratives are certainly entertaining and thought-provoking, but do you hear that condescending tone in there? Entertaining, please. But they call for rigorous evidence, nor does it to use metaphors without a basic understanding of the mechanisms underlying certain phenomenon, and to copy definitions and use them ad libitum in debates where there cannot be direct evidence of who is right or who is wrong. But I like how they say, because there's no evidence of who's right or wrong. And the result is that there is a set of slightly distorted definitions and concepts create a new reality. But reasoning by analogy should only be applied when there is a balance between the distinct type of organisms. When this is not done, pseudoscience is around the corner. Okay. Before I get to his second opinion, problem with his reasoning. And there is a problem with his reasoning. If I do an experiment and I somehow an experiment that is truly based on the plant, you will it because it will be non-understandable. In other words, it will be something that you cannot comprehend because you are logic to your science. In other words, all current science is an extension of human science applied to other kingdoms, whether we're talking about animals, other kinds of non-human animals, plants, bacteria, anything. Words, unless we can at first take steps where first we say, plants are doing this thing that is similar, and then we have a resounding, wow, that's pretty cool. Wonder what this means for the plant. And that study a little bit more of a plant view, which is what Monica did with her experiments, and she got crucified. She was told that her experimentation model was wrong. But the problem is asking me to create plant-specific testing to understand plant-specific phenomenon, but I will only accept it if I can read it in a human paradigm. Do you see the problem in this? Until science can take a step back and recognize that I have to think about this entire way of testing with the objections, with the physiology, but also the cognition of a plant. And only then can I start to understand to then create a bridge so that I can explain the plant mind under human terms. But if you automatically tell me I cannot use human terms, but I can't use plant terms because I don't recognize them, then I'm screwed either which way. See the problem with this logic? It's like you're not like me, so you're not capable of doing what I do. But your capabilities, I don't understand, so therefore they don't mean anything. And and there are plenty of things that humans do, plenty of things that humans do that we still don't understand the physiological mechanism that does them. We don't understand why it is that we behave or act or do something from a physiological perspective. In other words, my biology does not tell me why certain traumas get embedded in me and others don't. But you want me to only prove that a plant knows their trauma by being able to show you the physiological changes to their system. Without understanding that plants might have a completely different mechanism that has nothing to do with the mechanisms. No sense. It makes no sense. It makes no sense. It makes no sense. His arguments are interesting. I mean, I do get the way he's looking at things. I'm glad he called out the elephant in the room, that he is saying before we disrupt the entire way we do agriculture, the way we do science, the way we do genetics, we have to be able to be sure that plants are recognitive. I disagree with that. I think it's better to just assume that they are and not hurt a species and more prove that you're not hurting them rather than hurting them saying, well, you haven't proven to me that they're actually being hurt. I'll get stuck on this and I'll be here for cognition are not linked to plant sentience in a principle. I want to hear this one. These capacities probably exist in plants, although some are still debatable. I need, see, I don't have a soundboard or anything like that because I would have a sound for the rolling of the eyes. I need some kind of sound that goes with the rolling of the eyes. But they do not require sentience. They require detection and processing of signals. Isn't that sentience? Followed by a coordinated response based on the intrinsic characteristic of the species, cell to cell and organ to organ communication, internal pattern homeostasis, and, where possible, changes in epigenetics to transfer the acquired traits of offspring. Do you see how far length they go to try to dissect things that for us would just be under the clump of sentience? But no, we can't do that with plants. We have to describe all these different things that are basically sentience. Comparing behaviors and assuming similar triggers based on similar behavior simply does not pass the test for scientific rigor. Nobody is saying it passed the test for scientific rigor. We're saying it's passing the next level of the hurdle. It's saying we need to start taking all of these things in consideration in order for us to build up from there. Even the term behavior is often considered inappropriate for plants. Oh, I'm curious of what that means. My third objection, what he means by that? Why? Anyway, that's the first time I've ever seen anybody say that plants don't even behave. My third objection is to the inference that all biological taxa are to some extent sentient. Of course, because that would destroy your neat little world where you as human are at the top of the pyramid. This inference comes from a bottom up evolutionary view based on the premise that adaptive functioning requires sentience. This is circular reasoning. The premise is again pushing reasoning by analogy too far. I prefer to acknowledge the tremendous progress made in developmental and evolutionary biology during the last 50 years. This body of knowledge, weak foundation, weak sauce of notions and metaphors. It can only be replaced by constructing a new body of knowledge built on solid evidence, of which I refuse to recognize because your evidence must be in a human form, but not be applied to a human or look like a human. For plant sentience. Closing statement. Thanks are due to Segundo-Ortin and Calvo for stimulating imaginations and rethinking our attitudes towards these marvelous, complex, and very resourceful organisms that I like to dissect very much. I'm just adding that. I do love plants. However, I do not expect any feelings in return. Okay, I told you agriculture. I tried to warn you that this is what would happen when we were talking about somebody whose field of science is plants in agriculture. This is just, it's just what happens. It's what happens. It's how they look at the world, and I understand it. Okay, let's keep going. We can get through a few more of these. I told you they're not very long, but they take a while to process through. So the next one is called Questions About Sentience Are Not Scientific, but Cultural. Questions of, exactly, Jill, plant sentience is different from human sentience. I wish we would just kind of recognize that piece, which I think we can all agree to. Why is that so difficult for some people? I just don't understand. Oops. Okay. I haven't shared my screen. Sorry. Let's share my screen for this next one. Okay, I was getting past her and now I got slow again because I lost my remote. So this next one is called Questions About Sentience Are Not Scientific, but Culture. So let's see where we are. Here we have a neurobiologist. So this can go either which way. Some neurobiologists sort of fit into plant neurobiologists, but I have to admit many do not. So this is a neurobiologist in the Faculty of Medicine specializing in neuroethology, the comparative study of neural basis of animal behavior. Okay, so this is somebody who's researching attention behavior and spatial navigation in birds. Interesting. Birds is cool. And he studied the motor control of octopus flexible arms. This is also cool because these are already not your traditional type of animals. So I am so curious as to where this person is going to go. Can you take a guess? Do you think that this person communication participants, reactions, yay, pop out chat? No, I was trying to see how you create a poll. I don't know how to do a poll. I'll figure it out at some point. I'll learn things. Oh, wait, hold on. Ha! I know how to start a poll now. Very cool. Okay, sorry. I just learned that I can create a poll, which would be exciting to do at some point. Because in reality, if I was to talk a lot more beforehand, I would ask you whether you think this person is going to be pro plant sentience or against plant sentience. But let's just find out ourselves together. The findings of complex cognitive-like behaviors in plants are surprising and exciting. Ooh, I already like this. However, maybe I spoke too soon. They do not provide a scientific reason for ascribing sentience to plants. All right, folks, we got another nay. So what do we have? And we had a neutral so far, right? Let me go back and look at the list. We had a nay and we had another nay. And this one sounds like it's going to be another nay, like another, not really. But let's reason for ascribing sentience to plants. The target article, in trying to provide evidence for sentience in plants, exposes the weakness of the science of animal consciousness in general. In why the scientific method is incapable of resolving the question of which organisms or systems are sentient. Okay, wait a minute. I have hope. I have hope that this is a true statement. I don't think it is possible for us to use, it was what I was just saying in the, I do not think that it is possible to understand sentience, strictly speaking, from, okay. Now I'm a little bit more engaged. Okay. Reductio ad absurdum, RAA, is a form of argument attempting to disprove a claim by showing that it leads logically to a non-logical conclusion. 2004, Information Integration Theory, IIT, which we've talked about, example of RAA. The theory assumes person's assessment of what IIT as a consciousness theory, but the theory assumes that consciousness is the integration of information and that it can be quantified. However, while this theoretical quantification is correlated with several observations concerning consciousness in humans, if we follow its implications, we reach the conclusion that the internet, World Wide Web, is conscious. I would say that there are some that would argue that at this point it is conscious, but let's see where this is going. With feelings and awareness. This is clearly a ridiculous conclusion. Look, man, I don't know if I would ever feel bold enough to say that anything is a ridiculous conclusion, because at some point we realize that there are no ridiculous conclusions, because anyway, I just think you can be proven wrong at any point. So why go there? Hence, the main claim of IIT of consciousness is refuted by RAA, which is that form of argument that attempting to disprove a claim by showing that it leads logically to an nonsensical conclusion. Will also begin their exploration of plant sentience with an assumption about consciousness. They adhere to the common assumption that behaviors that are analogous to decision-making, flexible goal-directed behaviors, and the ability to change goals, anticipatory behaviors, I know what's coming, and therefore I make decisions on how I'm going to act because I anticipate what it is that is going to be arriving to me. Learning and memory and more are indicative of consciousness. Then they present findings suggesting that some plants display such complex behaviors. The findings are exciting, clearly showing that we should be careful not to underestimate the behavior of plants just because they lack brains and move slowly. At least that part we agree with. All organisms from single-celled through plants and large animals face similar problems of competing for resources, conspecific interactions, and avoiding predation. Evolution converges to analogous behavior solutions. Thus, complex cognitive-like behaviors can be found everywhere in biology, often without a brain. Does this mean that all organisms are sentient? Segundo-Ortin and Calvo urge us to take seriously the possibility that plants are sentient. To me, plant sentience does not make sense. Of course not, because you are a neurobiologist, and a neurobiologist most of the time relies on something, that you have to have a brain. No brain, no intelligence. And plants don't have brains. So of course, it doesn't make sense. Not only does the target article fail to provide convincing evidence to support plant sentience, but it raises questions, they wanted that, analogous to the way we define and measure consciousness in other species. As well as some other commentators and readers will disagree and argue that. Moi, I do not. Well, yes, I will. Yes, I will. Yes, I will. Will disagree and argue plant sentience is reasonable possibility, but this would just be a dispute over our personal beliefs. There is no experiment or observation to distinguish who is right or who is wrong. I agree with the statement. I agree with this. This is why I have said sometimes it would be interesting if certain people would just assume a base reality. Ah, this light is just right. Okay. Would just assume a base reality is that plants are sentient. And what would happen if we were to go from there and build our experimentation models based on the concept that plants are sentient? Wouldn't that be a cool way to do it instead of the other way around? Oh, we cannot even say who is more likely to be right in this because you won't allow it. Plants sentient is a mystery, as the authors themselves note. However, the authors seem to think that advanced on plant cognition and neurobiology will somehow provide plant sentience. I agree, but obviously this guy disagrees. Their paper falls short on providing scientific evidence. We haven't developed it yet. We have to sort of start to get into the mind of plants, probably from non-scientific mechanisms, like people like me who talk with plants. And then from there, build the scientific experimentation to be able to prove it to a wider audience. You kind of have to come in through the back door. That's it. But anyways, okay. Let's see. I disagree. Their paper falls short of providing scientific evidence for sentience in plants because the scientific method is limited and agnostic about the question of the distribution of consciousness in any system, including plants and animals. The scientific method seeks explanations of observable phenomenon, which consciousness in a lot of ways not. Its essence is the generation of parsimonious, and falsifiable hypothesis. The problem with consciousness, sentience, awareness, etc., is that the only reason we talk about it is that we feel it and it is important for us. Oh, okay. I am seeing you and I am agreeing with you. I am liking this. I'm liking this. I like this way of putting it. Apart from I don't like the idea that you say the way that you place it, because I think you can say it at the top, this part, and therefore the whole rest of the paper would be different. Apart from our subjective feelings, consciousness is not part of scientific theory. Physical, chemical, biological, ecological, and evolutionary theories explain observable behaviors. That's what I was trying to say. Because a plant can't, in a wholly scientific way, stand up and say, hey, I feel that you're poking me, which we might be able to see in animals, but even then, is it again just a reaction? We don't know. It's only the fact that we have language and we're able to communicate these things that we actually can measure consciousness. There is no other kind of test. I agree with this person. Okay, I see where you're coming from, and I am with you on this. Cognitive and non-cognitive alike of plants, robots, and animals without the need to invoke consciousness. The meaning of this is that consciousness in scientific theories of behavior is neither parsimonious, that's the word, that's why it's not coming to me, parsimonious, nor falsifiable. Scientists are expected to remove such unnecessary elements from their theory, but they can't. I agree with the authors that there is no scientific reason to deny consciousness in plants just because they lack brains. Woot woot! This is a win in the column when a neurobiologist says this. But there is also no scientific reason to ascribe consciousness to plants just because they show cognitive-like behaviors. I can understand, but that's what I'm trying to say. We don't have the experimentation in order to do it. We will never know whether plants are sentient. I personally do not believe so, but others might. Questions about plant and animal or robot consciousness are not scientific, but cultural. Okay. All right, you. I'm okay with this. I'm okay with this one. This one I liked. This one was interesting. This definitely went down a path that I'm going to give this one a thumbs up, because I mean, didn't give an answer that I liked, but I liked that there was a reasoning behind it that I can actually follow. Okay. Ooh, I am kind of afraid of the next one. So the next one is a person named Josh Milborn, and it says plant sentience and the case for ethical veganism. Let's see if I find it. Hold on a second. Why am I not finding it? Mm, Timescale burden of proof. Why am I not finding this? Oh, there it is. Okay, I just found it. Ooh, I am always afraid. So, mind you, vegans think that I'm on their side because I love plants. Yeah, I'm not not on your side. I don't have any problem with people who are vegan, but if you're vegan from the perspective of animals feel, and so therefore we shouldn't eat them, well, so do plants, and so that's not a good argument. I think it's about a different relation. I think what was it that Michelle said it? Michelle said it perfectly. She said, "Heaven forbid you have a relationship with your food." I think that that's the real interesting argument in this. Heaven forbid you have a relationship with your food. All right, let's go into this. My screen looked all really beautiful and crisp and everything, and then I start working on all of this, and all of a sudden it's like, not so much, not so nice looking. I don't know why. Probably because I live in the middle of the mountains, and therefore my connection is kind of not very good, even though I have fiber. But yeah, it's still not always stable. So I apologize for that. If I'm all pixely and cutting in and out and blurry and all those types of things, I hope you're going to stick around anyway. And I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on all of this. Like, where do you land on this? Anything you want to tell us? I'm open for it. These are hard. I think that the last person we just did gave us a great, in my opinion, probably a great way of looking at this, which is that these are hard questions. And I am appreciating, I have to say this. I am very much appreciating that oftentimes, as you know, if you followed us, is that oftentimes the arguments are very kind of blankety, black and white. They're very extreme. I feel like this is showing the nuances in the discussion from the question of agriculture to the question of now that consciousness in and of itself is not something that we can actually test for. We can't test for, and we might look. I'm even open to the possibility that if we start to test for consciousness, we might discover that even some humans are not conscious. I said it. I said it out loud, and I still think it's possible. I have met certain people that make me wonder. And so, all right, let's get into this next one. Plant sentience and the case for ethical veganism. So this is another, remember, we're always looking at what is it that this person does. This person, Josh Milburn, is in international relations, politics, and history. Okay. He is a lecturer in political philosophy we've done a political philosophy paper before, which was actually quite interesting. It was about a plant device that was kind of almost like a music of the plants device to be used in in politics, the broad sense of the word politics, not just government direct politics, but to better understand also climate solutions and other kinds of other situations. I found the paper to be actually quite fascinating. So I'm giving good old Josh here the benefit of the doubt to start, although he writes mainly on animal ethics, which I think is another real reason to hear how is he approaching vegan, like plant ethics, when you think of the fact that most vegans become vegans because they don't want to eat animals and they don't think about whether or not the plants feel that they're being eaten. That's why I'm omnivore. Omnivore. Okay. Does the possibility of plant sentience pose a problem for ethical veganism? Yes. I actually think it does. It has not yet been demonstrated that plants are sentient, i.e., that they can feel. I did not expect that from you. Yes, science is still arguing with it, but can we just go with it for a second? Because I think your argument will be more interesting. We just go for it. Moreover, even if it were demonstrated that plants could feel, it would also have to be demonstrated that they can feel the effectively balanced feelings that are ethically significant, such as pain and fear. Honey, just so you know, we already know that plants feel pain. Just so you know, we already know this. Scientifically speaking, this is not me wishful thinking. This is a scientific understanding that plants feel pain. Fear is a feeling, and it's that whole argument that we just had in the last paper, which is about consciousness is something that can't be measured. But pain, rather than just neutral sensations such as darker, lighter, and wetter or drier. Finally, if plants could feel balanced feelings, veganism would likely still be the ethical option on the principle of causing the least harm. Cut grass, scream scent. Exactly. Thank you, Michelle. Not only that, again, heaven forbid you have a relationship with your food. That's exactly what he just said. They can feel, it says it right there. Even if plants could feel, in other words, they are sentient, veganism would be the likely option on the principle of causing least harm. In other words, their feelings don't count as much as animal feelings. That's really what it sounds like that this person is saying. That and plant feelings don't count as much as animal feelings. That is pretty much, let's get into it because we were already kind of saw a different side in the last one. So let's give them the benefit of the doubt. In a chapter provocatively titled Plant Liberation, Calvo and Lawrence report that some vegans and vegetarians find their ethical frameworks thoroughly shaken by Calvo's arguments. Yes, they do. Yes. I also have this experience when I do presentations on the music of the plants. I cannot tell you how many people come up to me afterwards, or even just when I do any kind of presentation and say, what am I supposed to eat now? Am I supposed to become a breatharian? No, it's about having a relationship with your food. It is a whole different way of eating. Very, very different. Anyway, let's keep going. Similarly, Michael Martyr. Finally, we have somebody who is going to be talking. We still need someone who's going to talk about chihuahuas. Nobody's talked about chihuahuas yet. But at least they're bringing up Martyr. These are kind of like the superstars of this field where you always see their names in all the papers. Anthony Chihuahuas, Michael Martyr, Paco Calvo, Monica Galliano. There's a whole slew of them. In Plant Thinking reports that his non-vegetarian acquaintances rejoice in the idea that those who refuse to eat meat might not be righteous after all. Part of taking the possibility of plant sentience seriously is to ask what its ethical consequences would be. Indeed, Segundo-Ortin and Calvo conclude their target article with ethics. Should ethical vegans be worried about plant sentience? Yes, they should be. Consider a rights-based case for veganism. If animals have rights because they are sentient and plants are sentient, then surely plants should have rights too. Yes, they should. Yes, now we're getting it. That would create a dilemma. No, it wouldn't. It wouldn't. It would force us to think differently. It would just force us to act and behave and to relate differently. Either it is ethical for humans to eat right bearers, or it is unethical for them to eat either animals or plants. It is ethical. It is about relationship. The former would seem to undermine veganism. The latter would seem to entail human extinction. Please tell me that he's going to go into the gray area, because it is not that extreme. And by the way, it's not entail human extinction, because I just the other day saw a post on somebody that just did a 7-day breatharian course. So it is possible. You can be a breatharian. It is possible. A natural way to overcome this dilemma would be to deny that plants are sentient. That's what a lot of people are trying to do. This is the route taken by many animal ethicists. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And also and then human neurobiologists and crop people, like anybody in agriculture. Not everybody, some. In agriculture, yeah. Martha Nussbaum, for example, doubts that plants are sentient and hence excludes them from the domain of justice. Many will share her doubts. But there would be other ways to overcome the dilemma. I hope you're going to get there. Animal ethicists and vegans could hold what is ethically relevant about sentience is affective valence. Sentient states can include effectively neutral sensations, such as, for human, what it feels to see blue, to hear a swish, to feel warm, or to touch a wet surface, or as well as effectively valent states such as pain or pleasure. I would argue Blue for me is definitely effectively balanced for reasons that I'm not going to go into, but blue elicits a definitely strong emotion whenever I see them that is equivalent to pain or pleasure. We won't state which one. I have argued that it is the valence states that matter for rights attribution. I disagree because who the hell are you to state what is valenced or not? If plants could only feel effectively neutral states, then although they would be in a sense sentient, they would not be right bearers. Man, I don't know if I want to chop things with an X. Like seriously? Sentience, for Segundo-Ortin and Calvo, refers to the capacity of an individual to have felt states, including sensory experiences, external or internal. The target article does call for investigation of valence sentience in plants, but Segundo-Ortin and Calvo do not seem to consider it necessary for sentience simpliciter. So perhaps their case for plant sentience does not concern the case for veganism. What if plants do have valenced experiences? Presumably, that would mean humans must recognize that whatever steps they take may harm beings with important interest. Ding, 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 ding. Sorry, hopefully that wasn't too loud. But yes, now you're starting to get it. Now you're starting to understand. That is exactly what we're trying to say. That whatever steps anybody takes, you are going to harm an important interest. I just saw a post by somebody that I can't believe I didn't think about it myself. Like, I have to admit, this is one of those cases where I share with you my own inability to think through all of this at the level that it should be thought through, which is somebody posted, hey, when there's a fire and you go out to, for example, the ocean, or in my case, I have a river in front of me, and they do sometimes when there are fires here, the helicopter will come and suck water out of the river. And they said, if they're sucking water out of the ocean or a lake or a river, does that mean that they're throwing fish and other beings of the sea into a fire? I was horrified to realize that I hadn't thought about. I hadn't really thought about the whole concept, because even when they do it, I was just more fascinated with the technology. But I was horrified that I was fascinated by the technology and I didn't stop to think about the beings in the water that are being sucked up and thrown into a fire. I had to take a moment of silence to apologize to all of the beings that I have neglected in that way. Okay. This does not mean we should adopt an anything goes ethical view, but it might mean that we should aim for actions causing the least harm, or maybe aim for relationship rather than quixotically striving to do no harm at all. Do no harm, by the way, is impossible. This is a very human view that exists only in the human mind, because in any other species, you are not worried about that. You are more worried about, am I only doing harm because I need to? What is my relationship with the beings I'm doing harm to? This happens on the savannah. This happens in a wetland. This happens everywhere. There is about life. All relationships are about life and death, and sometimes life and death at my own hands, or in the case of plants, not my own hands, my own roots, my own leaves, something like that. Such ethical reasoning likely still favors veganism. For example, if exploiting fewer plants is the aim, it is better to eat soybeans than to cycle soy through cattle for beef. Plants matter too can be the argument for veganism. I had this conversation with somebody who's going to be on the podcast soon. Totally cool. Going to be a great episode. Anyways, I was having a conversation with him where I was talking about the fact that when you work closely with plants, the more any really beings in my opinion, but for me, obviously the channel is through plants. But once you get closer to nature, not just do you fall in love with nature in order to become good stewards, I have found that you naturally eat less without even thinking about it. Like not a calculated, I'm going to eat less in order to not not take a life that I don't have to take. I mean, you just get full faster. And I've seen this with multiple people around me that the closer you become in relation to nature, the more your relationship is an understanding that a being, whether it's an animal or a plant, is giving their life in order for you to eat. And you take that moment. In the case of my own case, as a Dominhurian, we have a little ritual that puts us in frequency with our food. The more you do this, whether that's a blessing, whether that's a recognition, a moment of silence, anything you do, you naturally, without having to think about it, start to eat less because you, one, are nourished from something else, whether you believe that or not, that's your own choice, but this is my belief. You are nourished from something beyond just the physical. And at the same time, you do not want to waste anything. I throw away such little amount of food. The other day, I almost cried because I had something that I had in the freezer. And I guess it was something that I had put out and then I froze. And I don't know, somewhere in that mix, it must have spoiled and I didn't realize it. So when I unfroze it, it was spoiled. And I felt so bad throwing that out. If it wouldn't have been to the extreme that it was, I would have tried to find a way to save because the idea of, any of what came together to put that particular food together, just I don't really waste a lot of food. I don't really waste a lot of food. And I don't do it consciously. It's just well, I mean, it's conscious, but it's conscious at a different level. It's become a part of who I am. But we can also ask which kinds of plant exploitation are harmless or less harmful. For example, some fruitarian vegans eat only fruit that plants have dropped themselves. If I was a fruitarian, I would probably die. I don't think I can do it. I barely eat fruit to begin with. Perhaps we don't need to be so extreme. Can we harvest fruit without hurting plants? Picking a raspberry may be analogous to trimming hair rather than dismembering. Maybe you're anthropomorphizing so much rather than asking a different question. Here, mister, let me invite you to ask a completely different question. The question is, Mr. or Miss or key plant, what would be the best way for us to enter into a food relationship? And then see what happens. Or thinking like a plant. How can I eat you so that I give you an opportunity to live your full cycle of life, that I allow you to also propagate and create seeds and to be able to cycle through all of life? And what kinds of relationships do you want to have, which would not be a greenhouse with rows, in order for you to have lived a very good life so that when you tell me that it is a time for me to harvest you and to eat you, it becomes me bringing in your life force energy and continuing your legacy through my food, through my poop, through other which ways. How about thinking about the plant as a plant rather than anthropomorphizing the plant? It's just a thought. It's just a thought. It's just a thought. Maybe plant interests are quite different from animal interests. Do you even know what the animal interests are? How have you asked the cow what the cow wants? I think not. For example, death might not be bad for a plant. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. And berries are meant to be eaten and scattered. There's birds that come. There's all kinds of animal relationships. That's what's missing, relationships. If so, harvesting potatoes needn't worry us, even if it kills the plant. And perhaps only some plants are sentient. Let's not get silly. We already worked so hard to accept the idea that we're going to work on the hypothesis that plants are sentient. Please do not throw that away from me by then saying only some. Even if we must be careful with peas, our favorite example of Segundo-Ortiz and Calvo, that tells us nothing about wheat. But this, well, that's because Mancuso writes about wheat and amaranth and rye, amaranth, rye, one of the two. But if this is all just speculation, then there would be work to do incorporating plants into animal ethics if plants have valent sentience. That's a big if. Well, we know what you think. We already know what this is thinking. Ooh, what the heck just happened? How did all of a sudden my thing get so big? So weird. Lately, my video is so bizarre. It keeps like shifting up the zoom and I haven't been able to figure out exactly what is happening or why. Anyway, so we have somebody here who's like, I'm willing to play the idea game, but I don't know if I'd buy it. Well, that's already a step forward. I mean, I think it's kind of interesting. Do we have time for one more? Let's see. Let's see how long it is. Let's see how long the next one is because I'm actually really enjoying these. What can plant science learn from animal nervous systems? Ooh, this might be intense. Let's see. Hold on. Let's open it and see how long it is. Because, you know, some of these are short, some of these are really long. And until I open them up, I don't. Oh, no, this one's a little longer. Yeesh. Oh, no, wait. Why does it say that? Oh, because they put it that way. Okay. It's actually really only 2 pages. Okay. Hold on. Let's share it up here. Let me cue it up and get it ready. What plant science can learn from animal nervous systems? Doo-doo! Here we are. There's a bunch of these. I'm telling you, they are pretty quick because they are not that long, but they are really interesting. I don't know about you. I'd love to hear it in the comments, what it is that you think about these, because I actually think that these are in the perspective of, I love having all of the different opinions that we can work with and thinking about it from the many different ways to look at this particular situation. So, but you know, of course, I want to hear it from you. Okay, so let's get into this one. So who is this person? Luis Pessoa, who is in the Department of Psychology at the University of Maryland, is a neuroscientist. So we're back into the world of neurobiology, interested in how emotion, motivation, and cognition are integrated. Very important piece in the brain. So this could go really bad for us. Like, I say bad for us, but it's not really us. It's bad for the plants because normally anybody who works with brains struggles with trying to think that there are other mechanisms, but maybe. Okay. Let's go for this one. I welcome Segundo-Ortin and Calvo's call for rigorous science of plant behavior and physiology. My commentary addresses 3 points drawn from the literature on animal brains that could help elucidate the possibility of cognition and sentience in plants. The presumed requirement of a centralized brain, I hope that he's going to say, is not necessary. Centralization of control versus hierarchical organization, which again, there was a really good paper around the idea of nervous system functions without nervous system biology, nervous system functions in general without focusing on human nervous system biology. We'll see where we go. 3, connecting plant research with research on animal nervous system. Okay. I'm already liking you. So far, at least you're nice. I applaud Segundo-Ortin and Calvo's call for rigorous science of plant behavior and accompanying physiology. They provide an excellent summary of plant behaviors that have links to cognition, from communication to decision-making and learning and memory. As the authors state, the situation faced and the domain of plants is rather similar to the one animal researchers face. I agree with the authors that the possibility of plant cognition and sentience should not be excluded out of hand. As in animal research, rigorous science is needed to move forward. So, 1, brain basis. An unimportant point raised by the authors, unimportant point raised by the authors is that very different functional and anatomical structures can give rise to cognition and sentience in different species. Hallelujah! Hallelujah, hallelujah. A neurobiologist that actually states this. I am liking you. I am liking you. A particularly informative example is provided by considering mammals and birds. Many of the sophisticated cognitive capacities of mammals have long been known to be produced by the highly differentiated gray matter of the cerebral cortex, however, the neocortex. However, in the last 20 years, a number of bird species have also been found to have extremely sophisticated cognitive capacities comparable to those of elephants, dolphins, and primates, including the great apes. Birds exhibit complex communication, memory, navigation, problem solving skills, including tool use, as well as complex social behaviors. Yes, yes, they do. The avian, if scientist mind has balanced relationship to heart. Thank you, Jill. That is a great reminder of like one of the things that should, yes. The avian and mammalian lineages diverged more than 300 million years ago. Although the brains of both these vertebrates taxonomic groups follows the basic plan of the vertebrate's brain, the telencephalic organization of birds is very different from that of other mammals. Birds have no layered cortex, yet their brain can support comparable cognitive capacities. It remains an empirical question which physiological and anatomical organizations can support cognition and sentience. Two, centralization. So basically, yes, it is true that for most of what we think of as consciousness and of elevated cognitive functions, we think of as a brain. But I think this is a summary of what he's saying, but birds are showing us that it's not necessarily the brain in the way that we expect it to be seen in humans and in other like animals, but instead there could be a completely different physiology that is brain-like, which is why it's called plant neurobiology, because that's exactly what people like Mancuso and Belushka are trying to argue, is that there are equivalent behavior and functionality has developed in different kind of physiology. That's really the crux of it. Centralization of control versus, so he's saying, look at birds and you kind of prove that point. Centralization of control versus hierarchical organization. One of the arguments against plant cognitions discussed in the target article is that a central controller is necessary for complex cognition. We don't believe that. A growing number of studies, however, have emphasized that there can be more hierarchical, as opposed to hierarchical, brain organizations in vertebrate animals and in invertebrates. Look at cephalopods, like octopi. It is usual to think that many of the brain's important functions depend on a centralized form of organization. For example, the prefrontal cortex can be viewed as an area where many types of information converge to allow it to control behavior. A different view is that brain organization is decentralized, with processing through interactions of many spatially distributed areas rather than a master controller. Instead of flowing hierarchically to one area where all the pieces are integrated, information flows in multiple directions without a strict hierarchy. I believe Segundo-Ortin and Calvo are right that spatial centralization may not be necessary for cognition and sentience. Although certain forms of functional centralization might still be important, animals have compact bodies that must move in an integrated manner, requiring some form of functional centralization. Having parts of the animal approach an object while other part retreats would clearly be problematic. But functional centralization need not be implemented as anatomical centralization, although it might sometimes be helpful. Distributed processing can produce emergent, coherent patterns of organization without having to draw all components to the same spatial location. This is probably the most easy to read and understand neurobiological based paper we have read yet to date. So chapeau. I am so happy for that. Let's go into animal nervous systems. As the target, you know what, actually, as a small aside, what I'm really loving about all these papers is that oftentimes when you write a long paper, it is filled with, there's an ontological understanding of how you're supposed to do papers that includes tons of fancy words and lots of filler words. I like that these are short, sweet, and direct, using a language that just about anybody can understand. I think this is awesome. Animal nervous systems. As a target article states, some problems in plant research are similar to those faced by animal researchers. Thus, it might be useful to adopt approaches that have been useful in the animal literature. For example, M et al., I'm not even going to try to butcher that name, suggests that an adaptive triadic model consisting of behavioral flexibility, environmental heterogeneity, and functional anatomical properties might be useful in studying comparative cognition. Proponents of cognitions and sentience in plants would benefit from analyzing minimal nervous systems. I have an entire paper I reviewed about that topic. Super interesting, about the idea of minimal nervous systems, or even just the nervous system model with comparable properties. Ginsberg and Jablonka, for example, emphasize associative learning in animal sentience, particularly the transition from non-associative learning to limited associative learning to what they call unlimited associative learning. Segundo-Ortin and Calvo might not favor this particular framework, but it might be useful to try to make more direct contact with the animal literature along such minimalist lines. Explicit comparisons between plants and animals may be useful in many respects. Do some plants have capabilities that are comparable to those of sea anemones or corals? I hadn't thought about that. Or perhaps, actually, that's not true. I had thought about corals, but not sea anemones. Or perhaps Hydra with its distributive nerve net. How have less mobile animal species, coral is a great example of that, similar in this respect to plants, evolved the physiological mechanisms to meet complex adaptive challenges that differ from those evolved in more mobile life forms? I don't know anything about coral, but now that Luis talked about it, I'm curious. Why is coral an animal? Could coral be a plant? No, or something completely different? Hmm. I don't, I'm going to stay up trying to Google that and try to figure it out. Ah, Segundo-Ortin and Calvo raise several important points in their target article. If we are to address the questions they raise, I think we need to adopt a scientific stance that does not reject the possibility of cognition and sentience in plants. We need to develop ways to investigate these constructs rigorously with all the empirical, computational, and theoretical tools available. Booyah! There it is. That is exactly what we need. We need more of this. Yeah, but aren't plants, they're filter feeders, corals are, but aren't plants, how, and aquatic plants, aren't they also? I'm so confused. Okay, not in a bad way. I'm ignorant in the best form of the definition of the word. I love that this is where we just finished. I think it's awesome that we finished on the idea. We still have a number of them. And the next one is going to be a doozy. We're going to start it off in enemy territory next time, because next time we're going to be talking from the most vocal human neurobiologists that have poo-pooed the idea that plants could potentially be sentient, that they could have any kind of thinking or processing at all. Oh, Lincoln ties. This is going to be, so we're starting off in enemy territory. It's not really enemy territory. You got what I'm saying. But I am excited. I think that this was a really great place for us to end. The idea of somebody who leaves us with the opening of possibilities. And this is why I wanted to go through all of these with you, because I think that they are fascinating. All the different approaches, right? The approach that says either you can prove it to me or stop talking about it, which makes no sense, because how can I prove it to you if I can't talk about it first in order to design my experimentation? Makes no sense. Those that say we're looking at it all wrong, you're anthropomorphizing something that shouldn't be anthropomorphized. Those that are saying, hey, wait a minute, what if we look at kind of more non-conventional type of animals and maybe there we'll get some ideas? we have to those that are saying, no, no, wait a minute, huh? But we should look at this. This is important. I think that there are so many different, I'm really curious as to what's going to happen over the next few articles of this. We have a number of them. So I'll be coming back probably next Friday. Although, it's possible I might zoom in. I know I'm cutting up because I need to figure out my connection. Maybe Fridays is not the best time for me to do this. I don't know. I have to go. I will do more research. Besides doing research into corals, I need to do research on my line and maybe tools because it's unclear what my tools are. So, okay. Next week, next time we pick up from here, we are going to start with the human neurobiologist. I understand. I don't know what to do. My connection is really bad. Sorry. And to think it's not even raining or anything like that. This is what happens when you live in the mountains. I live in the mountains. All right, I'm going to go do some research into other tools that I could be using and other ways that I could stream this so that I have a better connection. I will work on that. That will be my task to do. Your task is to like, to share, to comment, and to invite others to this stream. That's yours, okay? And we will meet back here next week. And if you want to have conversations about this in between now and then, please join the Naturally Conscious community. That is the premier place on the internet for developing human-plant relations and for co-creating with other kin and exploring different ways to co-create with other kin. So we want to see you there. All the links are in the description and you will have it there. Until then, remember to resist the urge to hold back your emerging green brilliance. And we will talk again next week. Bye.